All right. We are live. We're already getting some people coming on.
Awesome. Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, it's Sue. Hi, Sue. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming on to our program.
Good morning.
So while y'all folks are trickling in, we don't want to, miss anybody with our information. So we're going to launch a poll. This program is about fires. We're going to launch this poll and keep it up for a while people are coming in, just so then you have something kind of to do while you wait. And I'm also going to turn my camera around so you can kind of get a nice look at the park while we do this. Welcome, everyone. We're just doing this poll right now while we wait for more people to come on in. Vote however you like. And we'll probably get started in maybe 2 or so more minutes. All right, those of you that are on, go ahead, and if you want to do a vote for how you feel about fire, go ahead and do that. And then we will get started in just a moment, and we'll also share the results of the poll. All right. Got a couple more people all of a sudden. Please feel free to vote on this poll, and we're going to end it. I'm going to end it, I should say, in about 30 seconds. If you want to vote, feel free to vote. All right, 10 seconds to vote. And I'm ending the poll. And let's share the results. So it looks like a majority of you say it depends for how you feel about fire. And honestly, that's going to be what we cover today. Fire, it really depends a whole lot. So thank you all for voting, expressing your opinion. My name is Lily. I am at Calaveras Big Trees State Park.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caleb, and I am at Columbia State Historic Park.
And today we're covering fire overall. And yes, I did ask a very broad question of you because that's the point. Fire encompasses so many things. And it's just a good startup question to kind of get a feel for what y'all already think about fire. Now, we told you that we are at Calaveras Big Tree State Park and Columbia State Historic Park. But all that tells you is that we're within the state of California. Not terribly helpful if you don't know, where exactly those two parks are. So I pulled up a Google map that shows you all where we are. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you that. So this little heart right here, you can kind of just see once it comes up on your screen, that says Calaveras Big Tree State Park. It's got a little heart there because, well, I work here and I do really enjoy this park. So as you can see, I am not too far away from Columbia State Historic Park. There it is, right here. We're only about half an hour away from each other. I'm just further up the mountain than Caleb, but we're pretty close. And we're also, relatively speaking, close to the border of Nevada, which is right here. That means we're not in the Sierra Nevada mountains, like not way up there, but we're at what's called the foothills of Sierra Nevadas. So we're not super high up in the mountains, but we are, kind of around there. I do want to apologize if my internet connection isn't great. I am in the middle of a forested park, so if there's a little delay in what I'm showing you, I apologize, but hopefully now you can see the heart is where I am at Big Trees, Columbia State Historic Park. It's what's pinned right now, all right? So let's zoom this out even further so you can see where we are within California, kind of in the middle section of it, So when we're talking about fire, we're going to talk about fire within that particular area. And I do want to say for this program, we'll be talking a bit about fire. And at the end, we'll go through the Q&A for any questions you may have. So if you are asking Q&A questions now, we're not going to get to them until the very end. So if you want to hold on to your question until then, that's fine. If you want to ask it now, that's okay too. We'll look through them at the end and see if there's any we haven't answered yet. All right. So I'm going to take it away on my end, and then we're going to switch over to Caleb. But I asked you all, okay, how do you feel about fire? Very broad question. I like to bring that up because, well, there's all sorts of different things you can feel when you feel about fire. For me, though, if I'm thinking about fire, I just like to think about it from the basic scientific standpoint. What is it anyway? If you had to define it, how would you do so? Well, fire is just the chemical reaction of fuel and oxygen to produce light and heat. But it's not just that, because then otherwise we'd be on fire and be burning and all this stuff, and we probably wouldn't be alive. So there has to be a little something extra to get it going. And that little something extra is energy, often in the form of heat. So for example, if you have a lighter, like maybe this one, or maybe one of the longer kind of clicking ones, or even a match, you have to put in energy in order to get it going, right? I had to move my thumb around, get some friction going, put in that energy in the form of heat, and then the fire sparked from the fuel in here and the oxygen in the air. So those three components We like to think about those three components in terms of a fire triangle. It's a good way to visualize it. And it also is a good way to think about how to make a fire bigger or how to make a fire smaller. So if you've ever built your own fire in a campfire, maybe like this one, hopefully if you're ever in the outdoors, it is in a campfire ring like this one, because we do not want you to be irresponsible with fire. If you've ever built one, you know also how to put it out. Maybe you douse it with water or you kind of shovel it around, put some dirt on it. Any one of those three things, what you're doing is getting rid of the oxygen. You are smothering, literally smothering the fire. You're suffocating it. It's not able to get any more oxygen, so it gets put out. If the water is also cold water, then you're also getting rid of the heat, right? And that's one of the reasons why, at least maybe not as much now, but much more so in the past, we don't tend to get fires in the wintertime. It's just too cold to get enough energy going to light it up. And then you also know, if you built your own fire, that eventually it'll go out if you just don't put any more fuel on it. You put in a couple logs, you let it burn out, and it'll be all done. Because fire consumes the fuel it has. When there's no more fuel, the fire is put out. So we're thinking about it from a wildfire perspective. We have to think about these three things as well to make a smaller fire, so having less of each of those, or a bigger, more intense fire, having more of each of these, or at least some of these. So I'm going to talk about the two extremes of the having less or the having more. There's, of course, things in the middle. There's always shades of gray, but we're just going to focus on those two because there's so much going on with wildfires. If there's not a lot of fuel, oxygen, heat, then we have a fire that is a surface fire. So that means it sticks low to the ground, it doesn't tend to climb up on anything, and maybe it doesn't burn a whole lot. So if there is a fire, for example, in the wintertime, that would be one in which there's not enough heat, so it'll probably be more of a surface fire. So you'll see still a lot of green after that. You'll still see the trees standing after that, and it won't do a whole lot of damage in terms of killing plants or anything along those lines. Caleb, can you tell me, can you see my screen right now?
It says you have started screen sharing is all.
Okay, but you can't quite see the photo yet?
No, I cannot.
Okay. That's all right. So I'll wait a little bit more for you to see it. If not, that's okay. I'll be showing you another picture later on in which you can see that it is a surface fire, sticks to the ground, doesn't climb all the way up.
It looks like somebody in QA says that they can see your photo.
Okay. Well, my screen says you can't, so I'll just share it and hope for the best. That happens sometimes when you're in a park and you don't have great internet connection, unfortunately. So that's a surface fire. If it is a fire that has a ton of fuel, oxygen, and heat, then of course it's going to be a whole lot bigger. And that'll be something called a crown fire. A crown fire is one in which the fire can climb all the way up to the top of the tree. We call that the crown of the tree, just like how you have a crown on top of people's heads, right? And it'll burn up there. That is far more likely to kill a tree than surface fire, because if it gets to the top, the tree is often less protected up there from fire. That's where all of the leaves or needles are of the tree. So it's hard for it to create its own food if that's all burned up. And it's often where cones that have seeds or any other sort of seed structure is as well. So it's hard for that tree to even reproduce, let alone survive itself. So those are the ones that maybe every once in a while having one of those is not too bad, but if they're constant, that can be a real big problem because that can utterly destroy forests. And also, those are the ones that are often more threatening to us as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a quiz now. I'm going to turn off my camera and walk over to two different spots. And I want you all, after looking at those two spots, determine which one you think is more likely to burn. And you kind of think of it instinctually, but I especially want you to think about it in terms of what I just talked about, those three components of the fire triangle. All right, so this is spot number one. Just consider it. I'll give you all about 30 seconds just to look at it. Think about what's going on here in terms of the fire triangle. And then I'm going to turn off my camera again and move you over to spot number 2. All right, turn off my camera now. All right, so look in between these two locations. Give you 30 seconds again just to look at this one, consider if you think it would burn. And then I'm going to launch a poll for you all to vote for which one you think is maybe more likely to burn. And then we'll talk about why or why not. All right, I'm going to launch that poll. So spot number 1 or spot number 2? I'll give you all for voting maybe another 20 seconds to vote. Looks like a majority of you voted already. All right, 10 more seconds to vote. Okay, I'm closing it off and I'm going to go ahead and share it. So it looks like a majority of you, a pretty strong majority of you, thought that location number 2 is more likely to burn or maybe have a bigger burn. And I actually agree with you there. I also think spot number 2 is more likely to burn. What's behind me right now is spot number 1. You can see that there is some fuel there. Definitely lots of like that dry fuel, right? There's not a whole lot of green, but there's not a ton, especially not compared to location number 2 over here, right? We have a lot of twiggy plants over here. We have a log back there. And this one's actually more likely to burn and maybe have a bigger burn because of something I haven't mentioned yet. And those are ladder fuels. This right here, these plants, they're quite beautiful. They are called dogwood and they are supposed to be here, but they're growing pretty high up and there's a whole lot of them. Because they're growing up and they're right next to each other, that means that they can act as a ladder for a fire to climb up to the tops of trees. So the more kind of variety and density you have of the different shapes and heights of trees and other plants, more likely it is that they're going to be ladder fuels that contribute to a bigger, more intense fire. And those are the kinds of fires that we've been having a lot recently in California, these really big, intense crown fires that are killing more trees and threatening us a whole lot more too. Now, this didn't used to be the case. This forest, and specifically, right, not necessarily all California, but this forest used to have a burn every 7 to 12 years. That's pretty frequently. This particular location actually hasn't had a burn in about 100 years. So it's been very different recently. Now, this 7 to 12 year burn is a natural cycle both from lightning, but also at least partially due to Native American prescribed burns, also called culture burns. Now, these are acts done across all the United States by all different tribes, and they've done it for different reasons. Maybe they burn an area because they want the plants that like a fire to grow afterward. Lots of berries enjoy a post-fire area. So like the Native Americans in Minnesota, they would burn to promote blueberries, for example. In more Northern California, they would burn to promote hazel so they could use the twigs for basket weaving. So there's many reasons why they might have done a burn. Maybe it was to protect themselves as well, so they can control it themselves and not need to worry about a bigger wildfire burn. As I said, this particular location has been burned recently, and that's different. And one of the reasons why this is not as it used to be is because of new settlers that came to this area because of the gold rush. So Caleb, do you want to talk a bit about the gold rush and how they do fire?
I sure do. So, as Lillie was explaining, with fire being a natural part of California's ecosystem, it was never really a matter of if, but more of a matter of when old gold rush towns like Columbia here would catch on fire. So, I'm going to do a quick little spin around so you can kind of see what some of our buildings are made of today. You see, we got some wood structures, but we have quite a few brick buildings here. Now, this wasn't always the case. The idea that most of our gold miners had when they came to places like Colombia was to get rich quick and then go home. So I'm going to launch a poll here to see if you can take a guess at what you think this town used to be made of. And Lillie, if you don't mind launching that poll for me.
Absolutely.
All right. So go ahead and vote on what we think the original material that Columbia was made of here. And remember, this area was just meant for people to come here, get rich quick, and go home. And we'll give a few more seconds. All right, everyone, 10 more seconds, and then we will publish the results. And if you can go ahead and end the poll for me.
All right, we're ending it and showing the results.
Awesome. So we have 100% of people that said wood and canvas. And that is correct. Columbia was a tent town. And I have a nice little picture here. I'm going to share my screen real quick because I'm on an iPhone. I'm going to turn sideways a little bit. But don't worry, once I show you the picture, it'll go back the correct way. So here's a picture of an old tent similar to what the ones that the gold miners would have been living in when they came to places like Columbia. And the importance of the gold rush is before it happened, we probably had somewhere between, the estimates are 100,000 to 300,000 Native Americans living in California. And over the span of the gold rush, we had over 300,000 people immigrate from all over the world. So areas that were sparsely populated just exploded. They had boom towns of miners coming here trying to seek their fortune. And they would build it out of wooden canvas. And at our peak here in Columbia, we were somewhere around 25,000 people. And we had about 140 different buildings. So when fire came, and there were little tiny fires before we had two major ones. And as a result of these tiny fires, there was a city ordinance passed to have a bucket in every business. Think of it like a 1800s fire extinguisher. And we jump forward to the year 1854 now. The gold rush is at its peak, especially here in Columbia. It's a huge town. And on a hot July night, kind of like today's going to be nice and warm and hot, somebody either knocked over a candle, a lantern, or maybe accidentally knocked over the pan on their cooking fire. It set the entire town on fire. Everything burnt to the ground. And I have a little drawing of that fire. It's something the Stockton newspaper called the Great Conflagration of Columbia. And this, just to give you an idea, I'm going to show you this picture of Columbia first that's not on fire so you can get a sense of just how large this little city was. And now here's the picture of it on fire in 1854. This fire caused a couple $1 million worth of damage. Thankfully, nobody was killed. I'm going to zoom in just so you can get an idea. of this artist drawing right here and all the people outside of the town. And at that point, they only had a bucket brigade, and it was not able to put out this fire. So the very next day after our fire, while the ashes were still hot, our gold miners returned to mining for gold. Some of the businesses started trying to reopen, and a few of the wealthier merchants started to rebuild their stores out of the brick and iron, like this one behind me. And this one behind me is the Knapp store. It's one of the ones that was built in 1854 by Sewell Knapp. He was a little upset that he had lost all of his products. So he rebuilt out of brick that they made here in Columbia and the iron doors. The idea, brick doesn't burn as easy as wooden canvas, and those iron doors, you can shut them to prevent fire from coming into your business here. So the town of Columbia rebuilt. Most of it was still wooden canvas. Now we fast forward to the year 1857, 3 years later. This time, on the south side of town, someone was cooking dinner on a hot August night. They accidentally knocked over their pan, spilled some hot grease onto their tent, and caught it on fire. Since the town was still packed together like it was earlier, the entire place burnt to the ground again, this time causing around $7 million worth of damage in their currency, and it killed 4 people. When a store, they weren't able to shut their iron doors before an ember floated in and landed on the gunpowder storage in the middle of the store. And there was only a few buildings that actually survived that fire. One of them is the Knapp store behind me here. And that was because of Mr. Knapp's ingenuity. The roofs were still made of wood. So Mr. Knapp had the foresight to carry some big barrels of vinegar on top of the roof here. And when embers started landing on his roof, he broke those barrels of vinegar and put out the embers, saving his business. And the town of Columbia tried to use the bucket brigade again, but it was not adequate. And I'm going to kind of show everybody why. I have a bucket here, and mine's kind of leaky. That's what you would have had back then, possibly. There's may have been wood, but a bucket brigade, everybody's going to form a big line, and they're in a hurry. You're trying to pass this along. So as you're moving this along, you can see in my leaky bucket moving it, water's going to spill out. And when the whole town's on fire, this just isn't enough water to rob the fire of the oxygen. So it's going to keep burning. And that's what happened to Columbia here. So after these fires, the town of Columbia finally realized it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to get another fire. We need to do something about that. So what we're going to do is take a quick walk over to our fire station. And that was the solution that Columbia came up with. We didn't have a proper fire department. So we founded the Columbia Volunteer Fire Department, and they began to search for a proper fire engine, a hand pumper, so they could actually put out any future fires. Now, the hand pumper that they found was in the city of San Francisco. I'm going to show y'all a picture once I plant my tripod here. So the first hand pumper we had was Pepite. And my screen's going to turn sideways again. And I almost forgot to show you this picture. So this was the Knapp store that we were in front of. Even though it survived the fire of 1857, it didn't survive without any scars. This is the beam, the support beam. It was so hot that it charred it. And you can still see it to this day inside the museum. But this is little Pepite here, our first hand pumper. Now, Pepite's story is it was built in Boston, and it was being shipped to the King of Tahiti. The actual pronunciation of its name is Papaete. And it made its way to the port of San Francisco, like many gold miners. From what we can tell, the crew of the ship, they got gold fever and rushed into the hills looking for gold, and they abandoned the ship. It's a common problem for San Francisco. So San Francisco sent people to reclaim the cargo on those ships, and they pulled out Pepite. And they used it to fight a few fires. And then hearing that the city of Columbia needed a proper hand pumper, they offered to sell it to us for $1,800. But Columbia didn't have the money at the time. So all the ladies here in Columbia, they got together and threw a fundraiser dinner and raised $2,000 so we could purchase Pepite. And they sent one of the fire captains down there to the city of San Francisco to purchase Pepite and bring it up. And that was in 1859. So a few years after our fire department was founded. Now they decided that since we were a big enough city, we needed 2 hand pumpers. So our second hand pumper, there we go, was Monumental, again purchased from the city of San Francisco a year after we bought Pepite. Monumental's twice the size, and we bought it from San Francisco for $2,500. And again, the ladies of Columbia got together and threw a fundraiser to raise that money. So after Columbia got those hand pumpers, we needed a place to get water. And we dug 7 cisterns in our city. And this right here is one of our cisterns that we had. It's the size of an Olympic swimming pool. So if a fire happened, someone would come here and they would ring the bell on our fire station here, which would signal the fire department, which was 30 men strong, to come running. They'd grab one of the hand pumpers, rush to the location of the fire, and drop a hose inside one of those cisterns. And those little bars that you saw on the hand pumper, you have to have 6 men on each side pumping it. The entire fire engine is people powered, even getting to the location. And that's why we had those massive fire crews. You needed those 30 men because the 12 men that were pumping had to get switched out every 2 minutes or so, or they'd pass out from exhaustion. So after we got those hand pumpers on our cisterns, Columbia never really experienced fires of the same devastation as 1854 and 57. But we still had fires in parts of the city that burnt down. And as the years went on and it crept in to the 20th century, Monumental wasn't used as much because Monumental is very heavy. So most of the time that engine company would just grab a hose cart and join Pepite. And in the early 1900s, we started switching from those hand pumpers to fire engines with combustion motors in them. And another thing that originated in the 1900s was a new piece of firefighting equipment. And I'm going to bring a picture up so I can show you all this cool little piece of equipment. And there's a little picture of our fire crew in the early 1900s. And right here is something that's called a Pulaski. And this was invented by Ed Pulaski in 1910. He was a Forest Service firefighter, and he invented this to really help fight fires. And I wouldn't say it's so much of an invention as a combination of 2 tools that humans have had for a long time. We have the axe right there, and on that other end is something called an adze, which has been used by humanity for thousands of years. You can use it to pull away dirt or strip bark off trees. It's a very important tool that is still used today. If you look on any Cal Fire engine, our state park fire engines, or even Forest Service fire engines, you'll see at least one person carrying a Pulaski. And this tool came about from a rather large fire that happened in 1910. And Lily's going to tell you all about that.
Yeah, so this fire in 1910, it was called the Big Burn, the Great Blow Up, had lots of different names. And it wasn't only significant in that it helped innovate more tools to combat fire, but also helped spark a change that made it such that forests were managed differently. So this fire happened in the kind of the Rocky Mountain area, and it burned 3 million acres and killed 86 people. It was devastating. It was probably caused by humans, maybe caused by trains. It's a little hard to know for sure. But we do know is that during this 1910 period is when forest management was just kind of getting its start. Forest Service was new, other agencies were new, and they were trying to figure out how do we want to manage these forests. They often didn't take into account the people who already lived there, such as the people who've, been there for a while, the settlers been there for a while, or the Native Americans. So after this big fire, they said, you know what? Fire is scary. Fire is devastating. Fire can kill people. So we don't like any fire ever at all. So they established what's called the zero tolerance policy for fire. Now, granted, not every single fire could get put out. That's almost impossible to do. They did their best and they did a pretty good job. The problem is, I told you before that a place like this forest here, is used to having a burn every 7 to 12 years. So because of the zero tolerance policy, it hasn't burned in a very long time. If you remember the fire triangle, fire needs fuel, but fire will also use up the fuel and eventually get rid of it. So if we don't have a burn in ages in a spot that used to burn all the time, that means fuel has built up. It used to get taken away every, let's just say 10 years for this location, but now there's more and more of it. And that's not only in the form of like fallen logs, that's also in the form of all these trees behind us here. Plants that used to get burned away and maybe only grow a couple have now grown dozens and dozens. So we have a very high density here. And that means, ironically enough, because fire suppressed, fire is now more extreme. We have more fuel in this location, we have more ladder fuel, and the plants are actually overall a little bit weaker because they're fighting with more other plants for resources like water. We're in and out of drought, so that kind of fits with being an issue. But water, sun, soil space, all those things. So the really catastrophic fires we're having now is partially because of the practices of zero tolerance fire policy. But this is not only bad, unfortunately, for the forest, but also isn't helpful for the giant sequoia, which is this lovely tree behind me right here. This park is called Calaveras Big Tree State Park because we have these giant sequoias. The giant sequoia is the biggest individual tree ever, not only in the world, but so far we think have ever existed, which is pretty special. Now, this particular tree behind me is not the biggest one ever. It's not the biggest one even in this park, but it is the only living one that I also have at least a little bit of internet connection to. So that's why we like to use it. And it is right along the trail. You might have seen a couple people walking by. So I'm going to walk right up to this one because it is by the trail. If you see a tree off the trail, please don't go over off the trail to get to it. Just approach the ones that are already on the trail. So I'll give you a sense for how big this particular tree is. I'm going to stretch out my arms here. And you can see my wingspan is 5 feet. So fingertip to fingertip is 5 feet. And I don't know, this tree's maybe 10 feet across, something like that. And this bigness of a giant sequoia is not just how wide it is, but it's also how tall it is. You have to add up those two things. So I'm going to make sure y'all can see just how tall this tree is. Pan down, you can see the very bottom down there. Now let's go all the way up to the top. All right, you can see these trees are very, very tall. But not every single one of them is going to grow this tall, and not every single one of them is even going to survive to get to maturity, if you want to call it anyway. And that's partially because of their strategy. They have itty bitty little seeds. Each one of these little things right here looks like a little oatmeal flake. That is one giant sequoia seed. They start out super small. Part of it is that they want to be lightweight enough to catch the wind and get carried away and disperse that way. So that's one of the reasons why they're so small. But because they're so small, they also aren't really guaranteed to survive. So giant sequoias can have over 200 of these seeds, or up to, I should say, 200 of these seeds in every cone, which looks like this. But these seeds are more guaranteed to survive and produce a nice, big, healthy tree in the future if they're released from the cones after signs of smoke and heat. So after science of fire. Giant sequoias love space, they love sun, they love easy access to the nutritious soil underneath the leaf litter. The leaf litter is this kind of stuff you find on the forest floor. Bits of bark, bits of twigs, maybe some cones, needles, those sorts of things. So if a fire goes through a forest like this one, and it's a low burning fire, not one of those catastrophic surface fires, but if it goes through the area, it opens up space because it burns away some plants. That also reduces competition. It enables more sun to come on down because, again, it clears away more space, and it burns away that leaf litter such that there's easier access to nutritional soil underneath all of that. So giant sequoias know, hey, I'll do best. My offspring will do their best if they can land in an area post-fire. So having this fire suppression and other sort of forestry management techniques has meant that we don't have a lot of those kind of teenage giant sequoias because the suppression's been happening for a very long time. So that's a little bit of an issue, besides the fact that we are also more likely to have the bigger, more catastrophic fires. But we're working on it. So not only here, but all across, honestly, the world, people are doing things called prescribed burns. And these are burns that we go in and we do it ourselves. And they're called prescribed because it's just like when a doctor prescribes you medicine. You're not supposed to take it whenever. You're supposed to do it a very certain way. You're supposed to take it when you're feeling a certain way, at a certain dosage, at a certain time, every, blah hours. So when we do a prescribed burns, our fire crews are checking, okay, how hot is it? How much water is around? How much fuel is around? And they're only burning under those specific conditions. And sometimes, actually, like this burn we did just a few months ago, it was actually so wet they couldn't burn as much as they wanted to. But we would rather have that than the opposite. So we're trying to do more and more of these prescribed burns to get rid of the fuels, to help make sure we don't have the really huge catastrophic fires that start, whether by accident, by person, which unfortunately most of them are caused by that, or by lightning. But we also want to make sure these wonderful giant sequoias have a better leg up and a better head start that we haven't been giving them for quite some time. So doing prescribed burns and kind of understanding more about fire, it doesn't only help the forest, it can also help, the people that live pretty nearby the forest.
That's right. And by taking care of our forests, we're also taking care of all of our cities and towns because we're helping protect them, especially as these cities and towns that we have creep ever closer to these forests. So it's really up to us to properly manage and protect the forest so we can protect it and ourselves. And we want to thank everyone for coming to the program today. And if you enjoyed this program, I'm going to show everybody our little Ports website. So if you are a teacher or if you have friends or family who are teachers who you think would be interested in seeing more of our programs, you can head over to ports-ca.us and you can click on demand programs. And you can either look on a map or there's a little drop down menu for each and every park that does ports programs. And I believe there's somewhere around 50 of us. So you can explore the entire state of California from the comfort of your home or your classroom. And for our park's individual school programs that are in person, because both Big Trees and Columbia have those, for Calaveras Big Trees, head over to bigtrees.org. I have to reorient my phone so I can get the little drop-down menu here. You click on that little drop-down menu and go over to Education, 8 through 12 school tours, and it'll take you right to the site you need to go so you can register for a guided school tour at Big Trees. And if you're interested in coming to Columbia State Historic Park, head over to friendsofcolumbiashp.com, and then you'll click on schools, and it'll bring you to the various in-person school programs and how to register from there.
Yeah, and if you are not, if you're not with a school, if you just want to come by and visit, but you're a little leery about the fact that some parks cost money, Columbia State Historic Park is free, and Calaveras Big Trees State Park can be free. I'll give you the two options for if you do want to visit, but you're a little maybe worried about the cost. So we have one specifically for fourth graders. It's called the Fourth Grade Adventure Pass. And that's fourth grade as in starting September 1st. If you're going to be a fourth grade during that school year, you can sign up for it. It won't get you into every single state park for free, but we'll get you into 19 of the big ones, including Calaveras Big Tree State Park. So if you just look up Fourth Grade Adventure Pass online for California State Parks, you can see this and you can apply for it. It's really easy. It's just like, yes, I'm a fourth grader. Here's my name and address, and here's where you can mail my pass to. So folks who are with your fourth graders, help them out with this, but it's a very easy process. And again, you can get into state parks like mine for free with that. If you are not a fourth grader or you don't know any fourth graders, you can still get into parks like mine for free with the California State Library Parks Pass. If you have a library card at your local library, anywhere in the state of California, you can go to your local library, say, hey, can I check out a state parks pass for however many number of days? How many days you can check it out for varies with your library, so kids kind of check with them. But they'll give you a free day use pass to go to any state park. So the fourth grade one's restricted to just a couple parks. This one is for any park. You check it out, you can use your pass, and you can go visit Calaveras Big Trees or wherever your local state park is. So definitely make sure you look this up. This is a new program. Well, they're both relatively new, but this is especially new. So please use that if you're a little leery about the cost of coming to a park like this one. All right, well, thank you all for tuning in. We're going to stop recording, and feel free to, if you have questions, put in the Q&A. We'll linger for another few minutes, and if there's no Q&As, then that's all right. We'll just end the webinar there.